I remember that night so clearly, like a scar across my mind. It was one of those nights that settles over everything with a strange, muffled silence, where even the wind seems afraid to blow too loudly. The stars, usually glistening like a bed of diamonds, had vanished into a hazy blanket of clouds, leaving the sky dark and oppressive. My walk through town that evening had an edge to it I couldn't quite name. It was as if something was waiting, as if the town itself was holding its breath. Earlier that day, I'd found a strange note on my front porch. I still don't know who left it. No one saw anything, and I couldn't recognize the handwriting. The note had been folded with precise, clean creases and sealed with dark, almost black, wax. Inside, written in ink so deep it almost bled through the paper, was a single line. "Come see the moonlight reveal all." Beneath that cryptic invitation, someone had drawn a small map leading to the old observation point. Now, the observation point was a place I hadn't visited since high school. It sat atop an overgrown hill on the edge of town, half hidden by trees. Most people avoided it, not because it was dangerous, but because it had fallen into the territory of local folklore. Bad things happen up there, people would say. Over the years, rumors circulated. People claimed to see shadowy figures, hear faint whispers that carried across the wind, or even find strange markings carved into the trees around it. And yet, on this dark, unsettling night, I felt a pull. A weird magnetic curiosity that I couldn't explain, as though some invisible thread were drawing me toward the observation point. Maybe it was the note, its promise of a revelation under the moonlight. Or maybe it was something deeper, a desire to see if those legends held any weight. Either way, I found myself slipping on my jacket and heading out into the night. The closer I got to the hill, the quieter the world became. I could feel a sense of wrongness pressing in, thick and uncomfortable, as if even the sounds of crickets and rustling leaves had been swallowed up by something unseen. The path was barely visible, overgrown with tall grasses and weeds, and I had to keep my phone's flashlight aimed at my feet just to avoid tripping. The trees loomed tall and dense on either side of the trail, casting long, ominous shadows that made the walk feel longer than it was. Then, I reached the top. The view from the observation point spread out like a shadowed tapestry, with the small lights of town twinkling far below. But my attention was pulled skyward, to the looming red-hued moon that dominated the heavens. It was bigger than I had ever seen, swollen and burning with a crimson glow that turned the world into shades of blood and rust. A shiver ran down my spine as I looked at it, that vast, angry orb hanging so close, it felt like I could reach up and touch it. At first, I thought I was alone up there. I felt strangely small under that blood-red sky, but something else, a chill, creeping unease, settled in my bones as I stood there. And that's when I saw them. Figures, faint and wavering, started to appear around me in the shadows, as though they were materializing from thin air. They were scattered across the hill, and they looked familiar. Vaguely familiar. There was a young woman from my neighborhood, a man who had worked at the gas station, and others whose faces I recognized from somewhere deep in my memory. They all stood perfectly still, their faces slack and expressionless, and yet they all seemed to be staring right at me. I tried to step closer, to get a better look, but each step felt like it stretched farther and farther away. They remained just out of reach, their gazes fixed and unblinking. And that's when the whispers started. The whispers were so soft at first that I thought I might be imagining them, just my mind conjuring sounds to fill the unbearable silence. But then they grew louder, clearer, until it was unmistakable. Voices all around me, hissing, murmuring, rising and falling like a chorus just at the edge of hearing. They spoke in fractured words, fragmented thoughts, as if each voice was struggling to break through some unseen barrier. The words were broken, warped, barely coherent. "Help! Trapped," one voice muttered, each syllable drawn out and distorted. Another one, deeper, rougher, whispered, "Why? Here? Why?" A chill snaked down my spine as the whispers grew in number, overlapping and weaving together into a haunting chant that seemed to thrum from every direction. I took a step back, feeling an overwhelming urge to flee, to run back down the hill and never look back. But something kept me rooted to the spot, a strange pull that felt almost physical, as though the red glow of the moon was tethering me there. I turned slowly, trying to get a better look at the figures surrounding me. Each one was eerily still, faces slack and eyes vacant, like statues or mannequins abandoned in the shadows. And then, with a jolt of horror, I began to recognize some of them. The woman with dark hair and hollow eyes. I remembered her missing person posters plastered across town a few years back. She'd been a school teacher who'd vanished without a trace, the town rallying for weeks to search for her before her case went cold. And the man in the faded baseball cap? He used to work at the gas station just off Main Street. I'd seen him nearly every day growing up, until one summer he disappeared, and no one could quite remember when or how he'd gone. They were all here, faces I'd forgotten or tried to forget, townspeople who'd vanished quietly over the years, some without so much as a whisper of where they'd gone. Now they were standing before me, ghostly figures under the crimson light, silent yet pleading, each set of empty eyes seeming to demand something from me. I felt a wave of nausea, a dizzying dread that washed over me. I knew, deep down, that these weren't just visions or tricks of the light. These were the souls of the missing, somehow bound here, trapped under the blood-red moon. I didn't understand how or why, but the thought wrapped itself around my brain and took root, refusing to let go. And then, as I watched, one of the figures took a halting step forward. It was the schoolteacher, her face pale and her eyes shadowed by an emptiness that sent my heart into a panicked stutter. Her mouth opened, and I braced myself for some new whisper, some fresh wave of pleading words. But instead, what I heard was the sound of my own name, dragged out in a slow, broken echo. "Help! Us!" I staggered back, but the figure kept moving forward, as did the others, step by step, their hollow eyes fixed on me. Each of them reached out, their hands extending as if to touch me, their fingers curling like claws. I tried to tell myself that I was dreaming, that none of this could be real, but the air around me was cold and stifling, and their faces were so hauntingly familiar, their voices so painfully real. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my feet were leaden, my body refusing to obey. The ground under me felt strangely soft, as though it were shifting with each step I took. The figures were so close now that I could see the details in their clothes, worn and faded, like shadows of the people they once were. And the whispers became louder until they were all calling my name, each voice pleading, their words blending together in a maddening, desperate hum. Suddenly, a familiar face caught my eye among the crowd. My heart jolted as I recognized it. It was me. Or at least it looked like me, down to the smallest detail. The same tousled hair, the same clothes I wore, even the same anxious expression. But there was something wrong with this doppelganger. Its skin had a grayish, ghostly hue, and its eyes were pools of darkness, devoid of life or light. It raised a hand, mirroring my own movements, its hollow eyes boring into mine as it mouthed a single word that echoed within my skull. "Stay." The whisper wrapped around me like a vice, cold and insistent. I felt as if I was sinking, my mind and body locked in a strange paralysis as I stared into the face of myself. It moved with a hollow kind of precision, mimicking my movements like a distorted reflection. It raised its hand to its face as I did, its lips parting in a slow, eerie smile. The voices around me faded, leaving only this thing, my own spectral twin, mouthing the same word over and over. "Stay. Stay." It was hypnotic, almost soothing in a twisted way. And for a moment, I felt the oddest sense of calm settle over me, as though this was meant to happen. The thought bloomed unbidden, chilling me to my core. Was that what all these souls had felt? Had each of them been lured here, night after night, by that same strange calm, by the hypnotic pull of that red moon? But as I felt myself slipping deeper into its trance, something inside me rebelled, a flicker of survival instinct sparking to life. I forced myself to look away from the figure, breaking eye contact. The spell shattered, and the whispers returned, louder, more urgent, as if they knew I was resisting. I took a shaky step backward, then another, until I felt a strange resistance, like an invisible wall behind me. My hand shot out, pressing against what felt like a sheet of solid air. I glanced over my shoulder and saw nothing but shadows and trees, yet I couldn't move past this boundary, as though I was trapped within an invisible cage. The whispers grew louder, turning from pleading murmurs into something darker, more insistent, almost angry. I looked back toward my doppelganger, which had inched closer, its eyes now narrowed with a chilling intensity, as if it sensed my resistance. I fought to steady my breathing, my mind racing through every bit of folklore, every rumor I'd ever heard about this place. They said the hill was cursed, that the red moon brought forth shadows from the other side. Some stories mentioned spirits bound to the moonlight, unable to leave until someone took their place. And in that moment, the truth dawned on me, so sharp and clear it almost knocked the wind out of me. This thing, this version of me, was trying to take my place. And if I gave in, if I let it, I would be stuck here forever, just like the others. The figure extended its hand toward me, and though its face wore my expression, something in its eyes, those empty, soulless eyes, hinted at a deep, desperate hunger. I knew somehow that if I took that hand it would pull me across, that I'd become one of the whispers, another shadow bound to the blood-red moon. I stumbled backward, pressing harder against the invisible wall, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it. The other figures, those trapped souls, began to inch closer, surrounding me in a tightening circle. They weren't trying to help. They were part of it, part of the ritual, each of them reaching out to me with hands that looked both human and not, fingers stretched and twisted as though time had warped them. Panic clawed at me as I remembered stories I'd heard about breaking curses, about rituals and protections. I tried to recall the fragments I'd read online or overheard in hushed conversations around town. My mind latched onto a small ritual I'd learned once, one meant to repel malevolent spirits. It was simple, hardly more than a whispered phrase, but it was all I had. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to focus, and began to murmur the words under my breath, repeating them again and again, letting the rhythm of the chant drown out the whispers around me. I could feel the air around me tighten, growing colder, thicker, as if the moon itself was pressing down on me, angry at my attempt to resist. When I opened my eyes, I saw that the doppelganger's face had twisted, its smile now a thin, bitter line, its empty eyes narrowed in fury. The other souls shrank back slightly, their forms flickering as if caught between two worlds. The whispers grew softer, turning from demands into desperate, almost pitiful pleas, each voice pleading with a haunting urgency. But the doppelganger stepped closer, its hand reaching for mine, and I felt the strange pull again, stronger than ever, a force so powerful it felt like it was wrapping itself around my heart, squeezing, urging me to stop resisting and let go. I knew that if I took its hand, if I surrendered, it would all be over. My heart raced as the pull toward my twisted twin grew stronger, a dark magnetism that seemed to grip every inch of me, urging me to give in, to step forward, to take its hand and end the struggle. But some fierce survival instinct rooted me in place, and I kept chanting, louder, refusing to let the words falter. The doppelganger's face twisted further, its features contorting in frustration, but its hand remained extended, fingers beckoning with a mocking patience. The other figures stood just behind it, their faces ghostly pale and frozen, eyes wide and dark, watching me with a mix of longing and resignation. They didn't speak, but I could feel their silent plea pressing in on me, asking me to join them, to become one of the lost, another shadow bound to this hill under the moon's blood-red glare. A flash of memory struck me, a warning someone had told me once, a fragment of local folklore. If you meet your own shadow on the blood moon, never take its hand, or you'll become the shadow. At the time, I'd laughed it off, assuming it was just a strange old superstition meant to scare kids from wandering out late at night. But now, face to face with this twisted reflection of myself, the warning took on a terrifying clarity. I took a shaky breath, forcing myself to remember who I was, grounding myself in small details. My name, the feeling of my fingers clenching tightly into fists, the cold wind biting at my skin. I needed to break free, to find a way out of this cursed circle. My eyes darted around, searching for anything that might help, when they landed on a small patch of moonlight shining on the ground, just a few feet away. The moonlight seemed oddly pure, untouched by the blood-red hue, as if it were a gateway, a weak point in whatever boundary held me here. It felt instinctual, like a whisper in the back of my mind. That's your way out. But between me and that patch of moonlight stood my double, its expression now one of grim determination. It began moving toward me, slow but relentless, its eyes locked onto mine. I had no choice. I had to make a break for it, or I'd be trapped forever. Summoning every ounce of courage, I took a deep breath, lowered my head, and lunged forward, running toward the patch of moonlight as fast as my legs would carry me. The whispers surged around me, frantic and furious, and I felt a cold, bone-chilling grip wrap around my arm. I glanced back, heart thudding as I saw the doppelganger's hand latched onto me, its fingers icy and inhumanly strong, digging into my flesh with a painful, unnatural pressure. Its face was inches from mine, eyes dark and hollow, a mocking smile twisting its lips. "Stay," it whispered, and for a horrifying second, I felt my own will slipping, the dark pull stronger than ever, a force so cold and final that it felt like it would drain the life from me if I let it. Desperate, I repeated my chant louder, closing my eyes and focusing all my energy on breaking its grip. I pulled, harder than I'd ever pulled before, feeling its fingers loosen slightly as my words filled the air, pushing back against the unnatural pressure that held me captive. With a final frantic yank, I broke free, stumbling forward into the moonlit patch, collapsing as the whispers faded, replaced by a crushing silence. When I opened my eyes, I was alone. The blood-red moon still loomed overhead, but the eerie figures, the twisted shadows, they were gone, vanished as though they'd never existed. My breath came in shallow gasps as I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding with both relief and lingering terror. I couldn't shake the feeling that those souls were still there, just beyond the edge of the light, watching, waiting. Staggering back down the hill, I could still feel the cold grip on my arm, the ghostly imprint of fingers that shouldn't exist. I didn't look back, not once, until I was off the hill, the cursed ground far behind me. Even then, I half expected to see my doppelganger standing there in the shadows, still reaching out, waiting for the next blood moon, the next chance to escape. I reached home as dawn began to creep over the horizon, the first light finally breaking the spell of the night. But as I glanced back at my door, I saw a single dark handprint, cold, dark, and unmistakably mine, pressed against the glass. A reminder that I hadn't fully escaped, that some part of me or of it had been left behind, waiting under that blood-red sky. The days that followed felt strangely hollow, as if part of me had remained on that hill, frozen under the gaze of the blood-red moon. At first, I tried to go about my usual routine, pushing the memory to the back of my mind, convincing myself it had just been a terrible nightmare. But deep down, I knew it was real. The faces of those lost townspeople haunted me, their empty, desperate eyes following me even in the brightness of day. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that twisted reflection of myself, my own shadowy twin, mouthing that single word over and over. Stay. The handprint on my door had faded the morning after, leaving no trace, but the feeling lingered. A mark, invisible but inescapable, reminding me that something had changed, that the curse of that hill had taken hold in some way I couldn't yet understand. And then, the strange occurrences began. It started with small things I could almost ignore. I'd find my reflection in the bathroom mirror looking off, somehow, like it was a fraction of a second behind my movements, a delay so subtle it was barely noticeable. Sometimes when I'd pass by a reflective surface, windows, mirrors, even puddles, I'd see a flash of something, a shadowy figure just behind me, slipping out of sight when I turned around. But it wasn't until the strange dreams began that I truly felt that I was being haunted. Each night, I'd find myself back on that hill under the crimson moon, surrounded by those lost figures, their faces blank and eyes hollow. In the dreams, my doppelganger was always waiting for me, standing in the same patch of moonlight where I'd broken free. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. Just the sight of it, of me, twisted and empty, filled me with a dread so powerful I'd wake up gasping, drenched in cold sweat. One night, as I lay in bed, half asleep, I heard the faintest whisper, right beside my ear. Stay! My eyes shot open and my heart leapt into my throat. I lay there frozen, listening to the silence. The voice was gone. I told myself it was just a lingering memory, a remnant of the nightmares, but the feeling of something watching me from the shadows refused to leave. The dreams intensified. Every night I'd relive that moment on the hill, the cold grip of my twin's hand, the pull toward the darkness, the faces of the lost souls closing in around me. But now, the dream stretched further, past the moment I'd escaped. I'd see myself standing among those ghostly figures, my own expression blank and vacant, my hand reaching out to strangers under the crimson light, pulling them closer, whispering to them, as though I'd become a part of the curse itself. Days bled into nights, and I started to lose track of time. Exhaustion sank into my bones, a deep, unshakable fatigue that seemed to drain the color from everything around me. Friends asked if I was all right, if I'd been sleeping, if I'd been ill. I brushed off their questions, too tired to explain, too haunted to put it into words. How could I tell them that I felt like I was slowly fading, slipping away into something other? One evening, desperate for peace, I went back to the observation point. It felt reckless, dangerous, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the answer, or at least some sense of closure, lay there on that cursed hill. The sky was a deep, dusky purple, the sun setting beyond the hills, and the air felt heavy, thick with that same strange silence that had marked my first visit. As I reached the top, I saw nothing unusual, just the town lights twinkling below, the landscape cast in long, dark shadows. There was no blood-red moon, no spectral figures waiting for me. But as I stood there, breathing in the cold night air, I felt a presence, a subtle, chilling sensation, like a shadow hovering just out of sight. A shiver ran through me, and I turned to leave, feeling foolish, embarrassed by my own desperation. But as I started down the hill, I heard it, a faint, echoing whisper that seemed to come from all around me. Stay. I froze, feeling the chill sink deeper into my bones, and glanced back over my shoulder. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, I saw a figure standing in the shadows near the observation point, watching me with dark, hollow eyes. It was me, or something that looked like me, its face blank, its hand outstretched, reaching into the night as if inviting me back. Heart pounding, I stumbled away, racing down the hill as fast as my legs could carry me. When I finally reached the bottom, I turned back, but the figure was gone, leaving only the silence and the chill of the night. I staggered home, that single word echoing in my mind like a dark, unbreakable promise. I knew then that the curse hadn't let me go. It was waiting, watching, growing stronger,